Welcome back to Studio 1, where we are discussing the Canadian politics today, and where my guest today with me is Honorable Charles Sousa, Member of Provincial Parliament and Ontario Minister for Labour. Charles, we were talking about the Career Bridge and mentorship programs. Some of them are being offered by the province, some of them are being offered by non-government organizations that are working in the field, and you have the first-hand experience of mentoring or designing policy for these mentorship programs in your past. Talk to us about it. Tell my audience, they would like to know, a fresh immigrant, a doctor, an engineer, lands into Ontario, doesn't know anything about it, where does he go?
Yeah, it's not easy. And most who are professional in that capacity have a sense of where to go. I know that my uncle, when he came to Canada as a doctor, he had to go through all of the reclassifications, and it was a cumbersome situation for him. But we don't even have to talk about doctors. We can talk about accountants, we can talk about nurses and pharmacists and so forth.
Yeah.
And so, as I mentioned, there's a number of organizations, even the United Way and other community organizations are trying to facilitate that integration program. I know Eric Hoskins is also acutely aware of some of the difficulties. Often, many of my colleagues receive calls from constituents in that predicament. Mm-hmm. And there's a level of frustration because of the delays and the time it takes. And often, you know, they're sent off to go to Winnipeg or other parts of the country to try to form themselves as in that respective profession so that they can come back to Ontario or be or wherever they may be. It is something that I believe needs to be clarified from the very beginning, so that people who are interested in coming to Canada have a sense of what it really means when they come here and what are they entitled to have and how can they. So there's a partnership that needs to be done between the federal government and the province. You know, we should have our Minister of Colleges and Universities come here and speak to some of these very issues. We have an issue right now with second careers. Even those Canadians who are in the middle of transition in their jobs.
See, life, as long as the life continues, we will continue to have issues. Yes. We will continue situations and environments and circumstances will be created, sometimes voluntarily, sometimes involuntarily, sometimes within and sometimes beyond control. But you were very kind when you mentioned that professional people with a professional designation, when they come into the country, I believe there is a program in which federal government, again, tells them through the citizenship and immigration officers sitting in the consulates when you apply, they are told actually to sign a certain document, a declaration, a waiver, confirming and stating that they will not be able to practice their profession when they reach in Canada, and they will need to undergo a certain process or procedure. But that's again a federal level, and I don't know how strictly they follow it and what they do. But you mentioned Dr. Eric Hoskins.
Yes.
What a coincidence. Just the person I wanted to talk about, or just the department I wanted to talk about, because somehow or the other I think I'll end up talking about all other departments but the Ministry of Labour with you, but bear with me here. We have too many questions here, okay? Now, I was reading Dr. Hoskins' statement this morning in Toronto Star, where he's talked about the PNP Provincial Nomination Program. Now we are aware that Ontario became a part of the Provincial Nomination Program back in 2007. Between 2007 and 2009, all we have received as a result of the PNP program into Ontario was 465 immigrants. The number of immigrants that came in or were inducted into other provinces, and just to give you some numbers here, compared to BC, which attracted 2,225 immigrants, Alberta's 2,165 immigrants, Manitoba's 3,730 immigrants, Ontario 465. Now, compare this with the total number of immigrants coming into the country, 118,000 last year. Now, I know you do not make or establish the number of people you can bring in or induct, neither does Dr. Hoskin. And that's exactly his beef with the federal government right now. He is asking them to give us Ontario, instead of those miserable 1,000 inductees that they have authorized us for the 2011, a larger number of people. Talk to me about it. Like, why is federal government so ignorant about the province?
There's another issue, and is just the money that's associated with the funding of the program. So there are more of them going to Alberta or to BC or to Quebec because the funding that they get from registrations is that much more than it is from Ontario. Inevitably, as we all know, many still come to Toronto, even though they may be routed through some of the other provinces. And I think Eric's point is we deserve equity. We do want to encourage more immigration to Ontario. We need the immigration to come to Ontario. They provide services and expertise and labor. And Ontario is growing at a rapid pace, and we have to accommodate, if nothing for not just for labor, but for the intellectual capital that comes from countries and people from around the world.
I'm sorry for interjecting here, but you mentioned that the federal government must realize that we must receive the larger numbers as far as the immigration is concerned. We actually do receive the larger numbers, so it should be, and the word that you used later was equitable. We should receive an equitable number coming into the province of Ontario.
We're not getting anywhere close to the amount of money that's being afforded to the others.
Exactly.
And that's the issue.
And I think federal government one day or the other must realize, like, this is the largest, this is the biggest province as far as the people's concentration, absolutely, the service industry and the professions are concerned. And something else interesting that you mentioned, and I want to reiterate on that, and that was, you said that sooner or later, all of these PNP program people, no matter which province they end up in initially, they all filter down to Ontario. And that does happen, and we have seen examples, as a matter of fact, and I'll give you that. Coming to a slightly different point now, Charles, we have reached that level in our conversation that I can ask you something very interesting and something very funny and talk about the Canadian experience. Canadian experience, groundhog is something which is totally Canadian. And the groundhog has predicted there's going to be an early spring this year. And also, there are people who are talking about early federal election. Now, the groundhog has been proven wrong 3 times out of 4 in the past 5 years. What about the federal election talks? What do you say?
Well, I know with certainty that we are going to have an election.
But the provincial one?
The provincial one will be on October 6th of this year. I can tell you that for certain. And we will have a federal election. This spring, next spring. And I would assume that it would have to occur, if it doesn't happen in the coming session, it would have to occur after the provincial election, which would maybe either a Christmas or a next spring election.
And that actually, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. So you do the math. It's everyone's gearing up. I don't want to speculate. I
hate doing maths. I always like it right from the horse's mouth. I don't like to do maths myself. I'm very
the horse's mouth. You got to go to Ottawa for that one because I don't know it.
Okay, Charles. Tell me something else. Another interesting subject. Stemming exactly from this question of politics and the elections and the possibility of the elections happening. What is your message? How do you see the Pakistani immigrant community integrating into the Canadian system and then participating in what's your experience has been with the Pakistani immigrants into Canada, integrating into the political system? What do you say?
Well, as I mentioned, my family came here after post-war Europe in a fascist regime. They were not encouraged to be politically active. In fact, they were being discouraged because of secret policing activities. Mm-hmm. So you'll find many of the immigrants from the 50s to be a little bit more timid about political engagement. I have to compliment the members of the Pakistani community. Every time I've been to coffee parties, living room parties, engagements, discussions, the members of the community with their children are there to talk about the issues. And they're very open and engaged and concerned about matters that pertain to them. And I find quite refreshing at the ability and the eagerness by which they get involved. So that part is very good. My colleague, Yasser Naqvi, from Ottawa, is also the president of the Liberal Party.
Yeah.
You should note. Mm-hmm. He is a member of the Pakistani community with the accent, and he's very eloquent in getting himself across, engaged, and involved with all sectors, especially the youth. And I find that the community has done an excellent job of engaging their younger people to be aware and cognizant of the matter. So keep that up. And always call on your member. We're accountable. In the end, we work for you. We are representatives of, it's not like it was in Europe where they're, they talk to me, I'll have my people call you. That's not the case. In Ontario, it's very reactive, very hands-on, and your members are accessible.
That exactly is the message that we wanted to give to people who are watching our show tonight, that when we come into a system where political system is fair, is transparent, it's open, and it's available. Accessibility is the biggest criteria. Your member of parliament is sitting here with me today. You can take his telephone number from the internet, you can call him, you can contact him, you can talk to him about your problems, about your issues, about the good things in life, about the bad things in life, absolutely everything. There is no VIP culture. There is no flag-bearing cars and motorcycles stopping the traffic so that a member of parliament can pass. This is our Canada, and we better understand and we better live it to the fullest as Canadians. Absolutely. Let me come back before we go to another short break, Charles, because you mentioned something very, very interesting before we were talking, before the start of the show, and you talked about the Open for Business Ontario. Talk to me, tell me a little bit more about the Open for Business.
So Open for Business was an omnibus bill. It's a plan by the Ontario government to encourage and provide incentives for business to invest in Ontario, to reduce the amount of red tape, to make our system and tax reforms more competitive, to enable those investments to come here, like getting rid of capital tax. But it's also about encouraging people to work in Ontario. So we're providing, again, 93% of Ontarians are getting a tax cut through our tax reforms, personal tax cuts. We introduced the HST, which is part of the harmonizing of the two tax systems and does away with all the hidden tax so that those companies and businesses can do more exports. The idea is to try to encourage foreign investment into Ontario so that they can use us as a platform to go into the United States and other parts of the world. 143 countries around the world already have a harmonized sales tax scenario. We need to be competitive by doing that.
Hold on that thought, that number. Remember the number 143 countries. I want to come back and talk to you about our economic and trade offices abroad that you were once mentioning and their success. I have with me my guest today, Charles Sousa, Honourable Member of Provincial Parliament and Minister for Labour for the province of Ontario. Continue watching. We'll come back with a short break.